Judge Joe Brown's all-new barbecue sauce and seasoning. Justice in the form of flavor.
Law firms will take this as a retainer.
What? It must be a law firm where they hungry as hell. Now you gonna help me with this parole I'm dealing with?
Judge Joe Brown's all-new barbecue sauce and seasoning. Justice in the form of flavor. With one taste of our premium blends of all-natural ingredients, herbs, and spices, you'll fall in love with meat all over again. Judge Joe Brown's all-natural barbecue sauce collection is made up of 2 zesty flavors, original and spicy. There's only one way to bring order back to barbecuing. Just add Judge Joe Brown's all-natural barbecue sauce and seasoning, and you be the judge.
Georgia. And here we go. A Georgia Court of Appeals has disqualified the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis, from that election interference case. It's coming down right now. The case against Trump and more than a dozen others already largely stalled, as you know. The new ruling means that it will be up to the prosecuting attorney's council in the state of Georgia to find another prosecutor to decide on the case, to take it over and make a decision as to whether or not they continue with the prosecution of the incoming president.
And former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo is here. John, does this mean that this is yet another one of the cases against Trump that could go away before he's president?
It's another example, Dana, of this lawfare campaign that was waged by Democrats, boomeranging back on them and falling all around their ears. Anyone who watched this trial, remember, this is the DA who claimed that the entire Trump reelection campaign was something like an organized crime racket that was intending to deprive everyone of our civil rights to vote. But remember, we saw the dramatic testimony over the summer of how DA Fani Willis had hired her boyfriend, essentially, to be the special counsel, overpaid him, and then had him bring charges against Donald Trump. It's a complete conflict of interest. And if you take a quick look at the Georgia Appeals Court decision here, that's what it says. There's such an appearance of impropriety, an appearance of a conflict of interest that Fani Willis should not be the prosecutor. I think this spells yet another case that's going to have to either be suspended or more likely just ended and tossed out. It's hard for me to see another Georgia district attorney wanting to take up this flawed case and try to prosecute Trump on these theories that his reelection campaign was some kind of criminal organized crime enterprise.
John, a couple of things here. There are 14 others that face charges. I don't know what happens to them, but she can appeal to the state Supreme Court in Georgia. But given what the Supreme Court said in Washington about immunity, I mean, does the state Supreme Court even take her case in Georgia?
It's a good question, Bill. I think what's going to happen here, along the lines of possible appeals and so on, is it looks likely, because of that presidential immunity decision by the Supreme Court, that any kind of state prosecution of President Trump would have to be at least suspended, if not dropped. You're seeing that going on, those arguments going on right now up in New York City with the case being heard by Judge Merchan. So even if they could get past immunity, they'd still have to suspend it while President Trump was in office. But furthermore, you'd have to go back and then scrub the whole indictment, scrub everything the grand jury did, and say you've got to eliminate anything that used official actions by President Trump, any evidence that came in from White House officials, from anything the president was doing in the Oval Office. That might actually fatally handicap this prosecution and require the whole thing to be dismissed.
It's interesting, too, because she had this novel way of trying to get at him through RICO. Was that a mistake as well? In addition to her personal behavior, obviously, is what they're saying here. But in a way, it was this like novel idea of like, how can I be the one to take Trump down? That's for like politically, she wanted that reputation.
Yeah. Dana, you and I remember we're Justice Department alums. Yeah, I remember you when you were there and I was there and we were, there after the days of 9/11. And you can use this kind of statute, RICO, to try to go after real organized crime, drug cartels, mafia organizations. DA Fani Willis introduced, I think, a really dangerous theory was that we could use these powerful tools that are used for terrorists and drug cartels and apply them to political campaigns, and not just any political campaign, but the campaign by the leading opposition candidate at that time, Donald Trump, the head of one of the two major parties in the country. I think ultimately the whole thing would have been tossed out because it violated the free speech rights of Donald Trump, the free speech rights of the Republican Party, and actually a lot of Americans who supported him. So I think in the end, this whole thing was going to come crashing down around Fani Willis's and the Democratic Party's ears. Anyway.
Well, it seemed complicated from the beginning. There is that case here in New York that's still out there, the 34 counts in Judge Merchan's courtroom. He made a ruling about a week ago that the conviction still stands, but the penalty will be judged at a later date. John, do you think that later date ever happens now?
I think this is Judge Merchan really still trying to go after Donald Trump. You think about it. If you look, Bill, you mentioned the presidential immunity case. There's a footnote, a really important footnote in that opinion that says states, even if they're prosecuting a president for private acts, can't use evidence from the presidency. They can't use what Donald Trump said in the Oval Office. They can't use what White House officials said. Nevertheless, Judge Merchan went ahead and held the trial and introduced that kind of evidence. He should, at the very least, order a new trial, if not force the DA to go back to it. But what Merchan is doing, which I think is still dangerous, is he's dangling these charges still, the sentencing, over the head of Donald Trump and saying, well, I can't sentence you now. Maybe I won't. He could try to get him before the inauguration, but he shouldn't. But he's going to say, I'm going to dangle that over your head for the next 4 years, and I'm going to be waiting for you when your presidency is over.
Well, you have to think he's doing the work of Alvin Bragg, right, Dana? At the moment. I mean, he works for the DA, right, John?
I don't know.
I won't say he's doing. I'm sure Bragg loves this idea because Bragg is trying to make his career out of harassing President Trump. And this is a terrible thing for not just Donald Trump, for all Americans because of the presidency. You don't want presidents to have to try to make the toughest decisions on behalf of the country and have to worry what's going to happen to me when I come out of office. Is this, two-bit judge? You have
to be able to have clear decision making. Indeed, John, you stick around for a moment. We have some other breaking news. Bill.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Judge.
I listened to that. That's on point, but it's kind of simplistic, and it shows, what shall I say, somewhat a lack of sophistication in federal and criminal prosecutions. See, Fani Willis has just started her list of problems that are about to be dumped on her shoulders. Remember, I have said over and over and over the last few years about this thing called the appearance of impropriety.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were talking about. The next thing is Merchan, who's an idiot, is about to get caught up in this. Bragg's going to get caught up in it. Letitia James is going to get caught up in it. Fani Willis is going to get caught up in it. Smith, the federal prosecutor who wasn't properly appointed, is going to get caught up in it. And it's a federal conspiracy charge. Now, for those who are listening the first time, a federal conspiracy, a felonious conspiracy, can arise when people agree to achieve something that is illegal, even if they do it in a legal fashion, in a legal way. Wade has gotten up and testified in front of a congressional committee. He's attempting, apparently, to get testimonial immunity, which is anything he testifies to can't be used in future criminal prosecutions against him, even if he gets indicted. But he's singing like the proverbial bird because he doesn't want to get caught up in this. So what they're doing is they're gathering evidence that a conspiracy occurred amongst those people who did what? They met up in the White House to plot how to get Trump. Met to plot. And that is a conspiracy, even if they submitted the case to a grand jury, which that's why they're not dropping it, because a grand jury is an independent entity under American law, and they indicted the parties down in Georgia. But that doesn't mean that a future DA is not going to take a look at this and say, hey, this is not RICO crime. I'm not going to get involved in setting up a precedent to say that if you disagree with a political party, you can go against them as though they were organized crime figures. And you see, RICO requires that a person or an entity make or achieve or acquire most of its income from what is substantially criminal activity. There was no question about income or anything like this. This was just political manipulation and maneuvering. And to say that if somebody said, find me some votes, that requires such a precise use of language, even if you took it at the worst, that you could construe that. That is just totally out of line with American law and would set forth a horrible precedent. As they observed, any dumb bozo in some back county of the United States could decide to go after a president, vice president, U.S. Supreme Court justice, member of Congress, or the House or the Senate, or any federal official if they didn't like what they did. Now, Fani Willis is facing a conspiracy charge. She's got problems that are going to get her in some much hotter water about refusing to comply with the subpoena demands from the state legislative body. The Georgia Supreme Court has on prior ruling occasions decided it has the authority to inquire into the expenditure of monies that they have appropriated. And we've got $10 million that's missing. $500,000 for juvenile matters, $7.5 million to catch up on delinquent prosecutions, people that have been in jail who have not been indicted within 45 days as per Georgia law, and $2 million for sex crime prosecution. So that's $10 million she can't account for. And they're demanding that this be shown. As you and I have discussed, it looks like what Fani is doing would be allegedly money laundering for a number of things. That would be all of these cash transactions. We have an IRS problem. We have another problem here, which is making a knowingly false statement to a federal agent or agency, in this case, IRS. She had a demand against her to pay $8,500 in back due taxes. She apparently, according to her testimony, claimed she didn't have it, but then according to her testimony, at the same time, under oath, she testifies she's got $15,000 in the cookie jar in her house. So obviously that's making a knowingly false statement to a federal agency. And interestingly enough, it wasn't just an interrogation. It wasn't just hearsay. She got on the stand and testified under oath, so it is evidence and usable.
Right.
The problem that she's going to have will be dovetailed in with what we have is a horrible conspiracy. That is, there are these people who are diehard, poor losers, and at all costs, they were going to get Donald Trump and destroy him. Well, they made a mistake when they got together and they had meetings to carry this out or plan this out. That is a conspiracy. The meetings were in the White House. Kamala Harris was involved in them, and Joe Biden was involved in them. And Biden might have immunity, but Harris would not, and it becomes essentially a federal agent or federal officer or office holder who is engaged in a felonious conspiracy to, in this case, destroy a political rival. That is such an anathema to the American system that it practically shrieks to be made an example of. And I see you got a new cowboy hair. Anyway.
The one from last week, yeah, but thanks.
The other one was black, wasn't it?
Yeah, the other one was black. Yeah. That's right.
All right. Now, This is very bad. Remember the discussions I have had about Nazism and fascism?
Yes.
Nazi is the German acronym for Socialist Workers, National Socialist Workers Party, Socialist Workers. And people sometimes get confused and associate fascism and Nazism with the far right. But in its essence, fascism and socialism are creations of the left side socialist liberal cabal that was operating in the first part of the 20th century, which seems to be revitalized, resurrected, if you would. And that's what the Democratic Party has been exhibiting. They want to repress the First Amendment. Harris, when she was running, along with that clown Waltz, both said that the First Amendment needed to be repealed or modified so that things like misinformation could be countered and suppressed, which is supposed to endanger democracy if you don't, which is crazy. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment, which is the guarantee that the people will always be equal to their government as a collective entity. The Third Amendment doesn't apply because there's never been a case in the history of the United States involving the violation of the Third Amendment. The Fourth Amendment on search and seizure, Harris on several occasions during the campaign said that essentially probable cause be damned. They were going to come in people's houses and see what they were up to.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fifth Amendment, the right to be free from self-incrimination and due process of law as it applies to the federal government. They wanted to trample on that. The Sixth Amendment dealing with appeals and such like that, and application of the law. They wanted to get around that. So they essentially wanted to abolish or severely constrain the Bill of Rights. And that's precisely what you would see with someone who is attempting to implement fascism. Now, some call it communism, but there is a difference because communism, although it uses some of the same methods, has a different purpose. Communism was viewed as a correction for the evils of capitalism. And when those evils were ended, then communism would stop having a purpose. That's inherent in what Marx and Engels came up with, what Lenin came up with. And even Lenin, the founder of Soviet communism, said that Russia would no longer be communist after 1990 because it wouldn't need it. And he used the specific words glasnost and perestroika. And what did we have? Gorbachev in 1990 said the Soviet Union will be into the era of glasnost and perestroika, just as Lenin said way back in 1990, 70 years before. So what are you getting here? But see, fascism is unending. And the interesting thing about fascism is it's not interested in universal good. It's interested in pushing one side, whether it is a racial or ethnic group, a national group, or in this case, a cult, meaning the rainbow cult. That is what has been the driving engine that we have seen, because Donald Trump stood as a bastion, a breakwater against this thing they were trying to put in place. Mm-hmm. There is a thing on X today where Musk posts a question: are you for banning the use of rainbow flags or pride flags on government, the display on government building? Yes, we should be, because when a government entity displays a flag like that or an emblem like that, it is effectively endorsing the concepts involved. And we do not need anyone trying to endorse an official philosophy or faith for the United States. That is an anathema for through the Constitution.
Right.
So here we have people that say you can't have Christianity, can't have Islam, you can't have Judaism, you can't have Hinduism, you can't have Confucianism, you can't have Buddhism as an official religion of the United States, but you can have the rainbow cult as an official religion or a semi-version of it. Granted, it has no God to it, but neither does Buddhism. It's a system of philosophy. So we were being bamboozled, and a lot of people went for this because they were interested in being fair. Well, we are supposed to be fair and impartial and non-discriminatory against all of these black people. Well, I guess that's everybody. No, that's not what the case is. These people are advancing a philosophy that amounts to a religion. It is a cult. It is a system of faith. And these people, in their attempt to ensure that this happened, conspired in the White House to take down Donald Trump as they saw him being an exemplar of their enemy toward this process of instilling this cult. So they met in the White House. Harris was there. Biden was the most likely there. Harris has said she was there. Wade testified about it to the Select Congressional Committee. And Fani Willis has been shown through plane tickets to have been there. Bragg was there. Letitia James was there. And Smith was there at some of these meetings. So when they coordinated, I predict there's going to be a round of conspiracy indictments, and there should be, because it's not retaliatory. It's simply using the process to set up a deterrent. In other words, if you hold office under the laws of the United States of America or any state, you cannot use the process of criminal nor civil law for the purpose of imposing a political or social agenda on anybody. And you cannot use it to suppress or chill the exercise of what is guaranteed in the Bill of Rights.
Right.
Now, that's a long story, but that's what Professor Brown has to say at this time of day relative to what you're looking for. And meanwhile, interestingly, one other little quick move on Fani. The Georgia state legislature will soon be back in session, and she has ignored a subpoena that the committee who wants to talk to her issued. So what? Somebody's talking. Who's
that was me by accident. Go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, what goes on is this. When the Georgia state legislature comes back in session, that committee can demand and have the sergeant at arms for the Georgia state legislature go physically arrest Fani Willis and bring her before the committee under arrest, handcuff her if necessary, or request, and that would be backed up by one of Georgia's circuit courts, a bond be set to assure her appearance as a witness. How embarrassing. Additionally, they are already proceeding in circuit court to have the court issue a subpoena, which apparently she has ignored since they have done that. And the third remedy is retaliatory. The Georgia state legislature can cut off money for Fulton County because it has $10 million it's interested in finding out what happened to. They can do that. So her troubles in Georgia are about to start. Also, when it comes to her law license, she may lose it for unethical conduct. She's made false statements to the IRS that were obvious from her own stupid testimony. She's laundered money or raised the question of it by her testimony. And remember, the bar is very concerned about, quote, appearances of impropriety, unquote. It looks bad. And lawyers have a problem that's been around for the last 500 or 600 years, and even Shakespeare remarked on it. He said, if you want to cure the problem, first thing you do is kill all the lawyers.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So you want to make sure that the legal profession, like the medical profession or the dental profession, whatever else it may be, whatever else there may be that is subject to some close scrutiny, is in fact an ethical and honest and forthright institution of professionals. So they will jack her up. She's subject to discipline or disbarment. So she's got state problems, and she should have federal problems because they need to make an example of her.